All right. Assalamu alaikum. We're doing a test right now to see if everything is working and the volumes are all okay. So I'm just going to go into YouTube here on my phone. So we're going to be starting at 8:30 on the dot. Inshallah, come rain or sunshine. So let us do that. And let us go to MSA Union. And let us see if it's live. One, two, three, four, five. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Okay, now share Facebook. Unstable connection. It's very strange because I'm using 4G. Share onto inshallah, we'll be starting at 2 minutes time. Just waiting for everything to be settled. Shukran for joining us. And if you're going to be watching this later on, thank you for watching. I think I shared it every now. Our phones have been one thing that takes us around during this time. Connects us to parts of the world that we would never have thought of connected with. SubhanAllah. Yeah. So we'll be starting in 2 minutes. This is going to be live also on social media, I think on their Facebook page as well as on their radio station. So we'll be starting in exactly 1 more minute, inshallah. And you can be posting any questions you have right on the screen there, as you wish. Okay, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين الرحمن Ar-Rahman, Ya Allah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the lockdown lectures with the MSA Union and MSA Alumni and the current MSAs across all the spectrum of universities and educational institutes. This is a great opportunity that they've allowed us, MSA Alumni, the old school guys, to also be part of. So thank you again so much for this. So as we go along, you can ask questions, interrupt me as you wish. I want this, I know it's a lecture, and lectures we're not normally known as to be bayans. This is not a bayan. This is much more of an interactive session where I want you to join in and share with me your stories and your feelings on the matter, and then we can engage on that matter. So I think this is really an opportunity for us to relax wherever you're at home and just be part of this conversation, inshallah. And this is the time that we all are facing a very unique experience in this world. I always been asking people that I'm meeting and chatting and saying, you know, I just feel like, imagine 100 years ago in 1921, 22, when World War I started and the world was just killing each other and massacring. Imagine the similar kind of situation. Stay in your homes, don't go out. You know, all your men have left. Well, in this case, our men and brothers are all still at home as well. But just looking at that kind of scenario, thinking what's happening, it's a global pandemic, global issue that's happening. And then looking at the various plagues that came post that. And this is just in 100 years that we've been living in. I just think back and say, well, how are those people looking at the world? They didn't have the information that we have today. We have this, you know, gadget that allows us to connect to people and understand so much more in terms of our reach in other countries. By the time news came from via telegram from India to South Africa to Australia, Australia to the US, we had such a long distance of time. And so that was, I think, a reality check of how it was then and how it is now. This kind of pandemic that we're facing is superbly unique to our time, and it'll come to, you know, when my grandfather was alive, I would ask him, you know, Nana, tell me, what were you doing during World War II? Do you remember anything? Well, he was just born in 1922, which was World War I. So he close to it, and so he doesn't really couldn't remember much of World War II. But I mean, it would be a nice, our great grandchildren or grandchildren ask us, like, where were you during the COVID-19 crisis? I mean, subhanAllah. Imagine if would you have ever believed? Would you have ever believed 3 weeks ago, say 2 months ago, I told you that 95% of the airplanes that fly in the sky will have ceased. 25% to 30% of the world would be in lockdown, where they cannot leave their homes, they can only go to essentials. Would you ever believe me if I told you that? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it. What I've told you, that there would be a microscopic disease that would spread right across the world in every part of the of nearly every part of the world, and affecting the rich people first, then the poor. We look at TB, we look at all the other viruses that have come, mostly affected the poor. This is because it spread via travel, was really become at the moment a rich man's disease. But it doesn't now decipher or discern between anyone, and that's the reality. So we're at home, and now we're inviting people via video to our homes. So it's interesting. I've been connecting with friends and colleagues from across the globe, from Australia to Russia to America, US, UK, and now they show us their homes, and some comedians were on, and we were chatting to them, and they'd be showing us their homes, and like, oh, there's my cat, there's my dog, this is my child. So it's a world that has changed already, and I wonder what happens in 6 months. I truly wonder. And so we're all surviving at home, and now we're like surviving on snacks and sweets. This is a truly amazing time to be alive. Alhamdulillah. We have to say Alhamdulillah as Muslims consistently, is as in always be grateful to Allah for whatever circumstance He gives us, hardship or ease. And we know with hardship, with difficulty, there's always ease. So, leading us now to the topic for today. Thank you for joining us, those on Salam Media, via radio, or Salam Media via the Facebook page. For those on my Facebook page, and whoever is, please share this as much as you can. Subscribe to the MSA Union website and the YouTube page, and as well as on Facebook and Twitter and all the rest of social media. I think it's all MSA Union is what you can find it as. Just type in MSA Union and you'll find all of their tags. Really, the MSA, I want to start off by saying, was I as a youngster was always interested in, always wanted and at school to join the MSA when I got to university. And at that time at UKZN, it was called the Islamic Society of UKZN of Natal, I think it was called Islamic Society of Natal, something like that. It wasn't the MSA. So when I came in, and Brother Ashar Amra, Muhammad Rayman, all those crews, we came in, and we actually, the name changed from the Islamic Society to the Muslim Student Association, because it was a global phenomenon. I don't know what the relationship now is as a global organization, but I know at that time it was known as like this huge global thing, and that's why we would call ourselves the Muslim Student Association with that similar kind of logo. But nevertheless, being part of the MSA at the student level was just a dream come true for me. It would open up many opportunities later on in my life, as well as during as a student. I got to engage. I came from a Muslim school. I told you there's going to be some gossip, right? About my life. I was in a Muslim school for most of my high school career life and studies. And interestingly, the Muslim school, when I left university, was school to go to university, I joined the MSA, and I looked at all my friends from school were still in the same cliques. But being part of the MSA has helped me to engage with other people of other faiths. So I would be invited as a representative of the MSA to the Baha'i faith event, or to a Christian Bible talks, or to the Jewish students event, and that got me quite involved, and I became friends with these people, because now we'd be meeting all the time, and it really pushed me out of the box that I was in from a Muslim school. And this is kind of one of my gripes I have with the system, but that's for another discussion. So I just want to highlight you the MSA and what opportunities it gave me. So those who are part of the MSA right now, use this opportunity to further yourself within your own career, but also within the space that you interact. The university, I think, is a beautiful place, a powerful place that has really... Moving on now to the actual topic at hand. If you've seen the little poster that was spread around, is the question that I asked everyone was about your footprint. How big is your footprint, or how small is your footprint? And this is kind of linked to both aspects of environmental footprint as well as humanitarian footprint. And it's strange because both are linked. Environmental issues, you would see through the discussion, is really deeply, innately linked to humanitarian issues. Both are, if not the exact same, because both are dealing with a crisis, a looming crisis, and we're seeing it now during COVID as well, but also a crisis of the future and the concern for the future. But what's interesting is one of them has to be a footprint that is small, and the other there is a footprint that has to be large. And that's the interesting part, where your environmental footprint, which is your impact that you have on the ground, physical as well as metaphorical, has to be low. As a Muslim, as a human, as for the future generations, your impact, your footprint on the environment has to be low, your impact. On the other hand, on the humanitarian side, your impact or your footprint has to be large. It has to be felt. It has to be impactful. And that's what I felt was really interesting when you asked the question, how big is your footprint? It's always about context, right? So I want to lead with the environmental side, and then I'll touch on some of the humanitarian issues that I've been dealing with. So to give you a bit of a background as well, I started off, as a youngster, don't know what I want to study, where do I want to go with my career, where do I want to go with my life, what is my ambitions, and I knew certain times I had to go through those processes, like any student, like any person. And my process personally was through nasheed, and I would say, music. I was really loved bad metal rock music. It wasn't good for me, but it was something that I was listening to as a young child. And I didn't have this connection with Islam, even though my dad was this, charity person and community person. And that he tried really hard, and I would join him, and I remember all the good stories about the MSA at that time, Muslim youth movement, and we could go to these camps and places and really engage in communities and develop our leadership skills and so on. But I still hadn't had that link to Islam. But it was my search and my research in understanding the understanding of how music and Islam relates, and nasheed and singing and vocal, which I was so passionate about, that connected me to the religion. And that's again story for another day. But that connection would happen only at matric level, and then later on kind of improved during my MSA days. So being part of the MSA assisted in my closeness to religion with halakas and obviously trying to combat some of the questions asked by atheists at universities or people of other faith. So in terms of my environmental link, I, as a young person, loved the outdoors, loved being part of nature, but it wasn't like this huge thing. But it was only when I started understanding Islam, and it was again in my latter days of university, of schooling, did I see the beauty. And Surah Najm, Surah Ar-Rahman, all speak about Allah's signs, right? Allah says, look at the moon, look at the stars, look at the earth, look at the ground, look at the sky, look at all of these ni'mah, these blessings, and you will see these are my signs, these are my signs. Now, we're not obviously taking literally that God is in the tree, or Allah is in the air, although he says he's closer to us than our jugular vein. But to understand it, was Allah saying, to understand me, to understand your purpose, to understand your role, you have to understand or realize, scientifically assess the nature that's all around you. And that's how you'll find me. And if the Quran is so direct about it, in so many places. I mean, I was talking, with my wife the other day. We started a little home halakha during this period, and we were reading Surah Ar-Rahman, and Allah, there's phases in Surah Ar-Rahman, and the latter phase, the first, Allah speaks about the various parts of the world and the sky and so on, trees and the green grass, and then He speaks about those who don't believe. And the last section of Surah Ar-Rahman, Allah speaks about the beauty, and this is the largest section of Surah Ar-Rahman, speaks about the beauty of Jannah and what's in Jannah, what the believers and those who are good would find in Jannah, in heaven. And this is heaven. This is Jannah, right? This is the ultimate place that we all would love to be in. No doubt, right? Paradise. We all would love to be in it. And Allah speaks about paradise as gardens, with rivers, with trees. Allah is telling us, this is what in my paradise. This is what you'll find in the best places of places, where I am, where Allah is, where the Prophet ﷺ is, where all the Anbiya, all the Awliya, all of the scholars and all of those who do good deeds will be in gardens. Gardens. It will be with nature, with birds, with rivers. With what? How can we not realize that nature has such, that gardens and grass and natural things have such a close connection to Allah and to us as human beings. And that is what changed my view, and that's what really attracted me to understanding in the environment, and then obviously going and pursuing it as a career. So, I mean, it changed the game for me. It truly did. So now studying it was not just the subject that I chose because it was easy. I mean, I did standard, again, I've told you some gossip. I did standard grade maths. I'm being honest with you. I did standard grade maths at school. To get into university at a Bachelor of Science level, I had to have higher grade. When you say takdir, when we speak about true Allah's plan, my father was like, and you'll get a job and you'll have a career. But this environment thing, we're talking about 15 years ago when I studied, it wasn't a really big thing. I don't know about it, so you have to, you know, you're on your own pretty much. And so I went to university and they tell me, look, your first choice was the study, Bachelor of Science, but you may not get in, you'll have to do a social science. And I just said, no, I have to do it as a science. I didn't do biology, I just did geography, which is a very 98% geography, but my maths was the problem. And I begged them. I sat with the dean. She was a Russian lecturer, dean of environmental science. And I sat with her the one day while she's finalizing registrations. And I came, actually 2 days in a row, I sat out in her office. And she said, she comes out every time for a smoke break and coffee break, and she'll see me. She said, you're still here? And I said, I have to enter. I have to be part of that. I have to do this as a science. And she comes to the latter part. She says, look, I won't let you do the revision course. I've seen your results. I've seen how dedicated you are. I'll sign you in. And she gave me. Now that is a word called sustainable development. Okay, I'm sure you heard about it. It's a big buzzword. Everyone talks about it's, you know, sustainability, sustainable development, sustainable living. This is such a truly a buzzword. When I say buzzword, it's just, you know, so flippant now. It's not even a strong word. It doesn't really mean anything. But the value and the essence of it really does mean something, which is connecting three spheres. We always speak about the three spheres in government, in sustainable development. The environment, which is the physical environment, which is the air, the plants, the trees, the nature, human beings. It's the economy, which is the economical understanding of the world, and it's the social, which is the human beings. And the interaction between all of these three and where they meet, these three spheres or circles, is the place where we have perfect sustainable development. That is, for future generations, you have resources that have been protected for generations to come. So, interestingly, this sustainable development seems like this buzzword, right? But the only way that you're going to achieve it is through combining all of these spheres. So I kind of lost my thought on the first point. But nevertheless, coming back to the university, now studying this, understanding it. So that was my point. So I did a triple major. I did a major in economics, as well as geography and environmental management, environmental science. So I did geology, biology, then a pure economics, 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, maritime economics, environmental economics. So really interesting in how I understand the world, how I understand a businessman. And as environmentalists, we speak about the spectrum. The spectrum is literally a spectrum from the, Save the Earth, Planeteer, Captain Planet, which I first initially was. And the other side is the economists. So the Captain Planet people, they like, listen, it's animals first, then human rights, like to that extent, that extreme. The other side of the spectrum you have is purely someone who is an economist who sees environmental sustainability or protect the environment as a financial benefit, as a benefit to society, mankind, economics. It makes business sense for you to actually have the resource so that you can sustain it for a longer period. For example, you're going to use all the oil in the world, and what happens? 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, you don't have oil. What happens to those major companies? The costs, benefits really outweigh. So the costs outweigh the benefits. So you rather sustainably mine this oil so that you have storage that rather your company lasts not for 50 years, but for 200 years, for example. So that's kind of the economics. So I started off on this side. I've never veered on the truly economic side, and I've kind of veered in the same. And isn't this what Islam says? Ummatun wasata, ummatun wasata. We are a balanced nation, a balanced people. So how much you differentiate between sustainable and climate justice approaches to environmental activism? Really good question. I'm going to come to that just now. So that's just to give you a bit of synopsis, and then about my life as well. I Then completed my studies, did my honors. I did it on pollution issues in the Isipingo River. If you live in Durban, you know about the Isipingo River, a very unique estuary and river that has multiple levels. I mean, we would sometimes call it the Rainbow River. It would flow black, red, green, yellow on different days. A really highly polluted river. And my thesis became a master's, so really appreciate the effort that was put in onto this study, looking at chemical flux. Was this estuary really working on the high tide, low tide, spring tides, and is the river really trying to clean itself out? But there's beautiful mangroves which are there, which is actually purifying the estuary, and the mangroves have never died. They've been there for centuries, but yet have so strong in terms of their ability to clean its own self and clean the estuary up. SubhanAllah, that is nature at its best. Nevertheless, I then started working for government, various departments in government, national department, local department, it's Queen Municipality, water affairs. I'm part of the Green Scorpions, dealing with environmental crime, illegal manning, illegal developments, rhino poaching, all of that. And then in last year, August, I commenced with my own company. I left government after 10 years of working with them. Long story there. And this was very interesting because I was started my own company called Khweza, environmental consulting. And Khweza is a Zulu Xhosa word. It's even, I found a company in Kenya and asked them, and they also have a very similar meaning to Khweza. Khweza. It actually means, it truly means the preservation. And that's as environmentalists we do. We preserve the current resources for future generations. So I wanted to move on to, so that's a little background, that's some of the gossip. I wanted to move on. I do a couple of presentations, and I did one recently with the Minara Chamber of Commerce on environmental compliance. But I had a few slides that I wanted to go through while I'm chatting with you. It's the first 3 or 4 slides, actually. So the first one is people always ask me, and to truly understand the environment, and already we have 20 minutes in, so I should kick into it. But to truly understand the environment, you have to understand the interactions, the interrelatedness of species and human beings together. It's not just purely physical, nor is it purely nature-wise, as in humans and nature. So when we say environment, we see it as all-encompassing, humans as part of it. So when we say you got to protect the environment, I actually say, are we protecting human beings? That's how you should always perceive it, always, in any case. So the other point is we survive from the environment. Every living creature survives from the environment. And Allah speaks about us in the Quran. Allah speaks about us in the Quran on this verse here. I'm just going to find it now. Sometimes we just leave it. Sorry, I just seem to have lost it for some reason. But there was this verse that I wanted to bring to your notice. Corruption. Allah was speaking about this to Adam alayhi salam. And when he brought Adam alayhi salam and Hawa to the earth. And the point was that there would be provision. Oh, there we go. This is in Surah Baqarah, verse 36. Surah Baqarah being the cow. فأزلهم الشيطان عنها فأخرجهما مما كان فيه وقلنا اهبطوا بعضكم لبعض عدو ولكم في الأرض مستقر ومتاع إلى حين. But so this is talking about the story of Satan and Hawa and Adam alayhi salam. But Satan caused them to slip out of it and remove them from the condition in which they were being, from Jannah or wherever they were. And we said, Allah says, go down as enemies to one another, and you will have upon the earth, and this is the point I want to, a place of settlement and provision for a time. Now, the tafsir on this there's many of the tafsirs who talk about what is this provision for a time. This relates to a very interesting point that the natural resources that we survive on, air, clean water, we look at gold and oil and all these natural fossil fuels, natural resources that we rely on. It could be that this is talking about it being available for a period of time. And it also relates to Islamic eschatology, which is the understanding of the end of times. That Allah says that there will be a time when the land will be barren. the land will be barren. Allah says in Surah 8 in Surah Kahf, وَإِنَّا لَجَاعِلُونَ مَا عَلَيْهَا صَعِيدًا جُرْزًا. And indeed, we will make that which is upon it a barren ground. And so the Islamic scholologists like Sheikh Umar Hussain and some of our local ulama, Sheikh Fahim Khan, agree to an extent that this is actually talking about a time that the land is barren. And we're seeing this. When we look at climate change, this is really, truly happening, where areas that would have beautiful gardens and plentiful of produce, from the ground, are now areas of drought, where areas of complete full capacity of rain, monsoon type of rains, weather wet most of the year, are now finding their lands becoming deserts. And this is the change that is happening when we speak about climate change. And this is potentially the link that could happen in the future. Look, I'm still a bit of a conspiracy theorist on how this whole thing goes. I'm not an expert on Islamic eschatology, but I've been doing some research and trying to link my scientific understanding of climate change to the end of times. The other aspect, sorry, I'm not looking at questions yet, but I will come to it if they are. So you can, don't forget to ask questions online. I haven't seen any on my phone, but we'll go and check now. I wanted to talk a little about South Africa in terms of our environmental responsibilities as citizens of this country. We have one of the best environmental law in the world. One of the best environmental law in the world. I promise you that. I've been to Melbourne, I've been to Dubai, and a couple of conferences, environmental conferences there, and they say that South Africa is one of the best environmental rights in terms of our rights and in terms of our legislation. South African rights, Section 24 of our Bill of Rights states that everyone has the right to an environment that is not harmful to their health or well-being, and to have an environment that's protected for the benefit of present and future generations through reasonable legislation and other measures that prevent pollution and ecological degradation. And I'll come back to ecological degradations now. Promote conservation and secure ecological, sustainable development and use of natural resources while promoting justifiable economic and social development. This is the right that you and I have in this country as citizens of this country. We have that right. And the law has come up with multiple, the National Environmental Management Act, the Management Waste Act, the National Environmental Air Quality Act, Biodiversity Act, and so on. But what I told you about was this little word called, or term, shall I say, ecological degradation. When we speak about environment, this is going to link directly to the humanitarian side of things. When we speak about environment, we speak about the ecological health of the system, of the ecosystem. And that is the interrelatedness of all of these creatures and how they themselves is a working system. The whole school, you'd heard this, the food chain. Is that food chain existing? Is it working? Are there excessive species of one type of plant or one type of animal? We look at the system as the ecological system, and is the system actually working? Is it really something that needs to be tweaked? Do we need to intervene and help this ecosystem? Especially when it comes to development on protected areas, for example, developers want to come and say, oh, we want to build a whole resort in this forest. And when we go into the forest and we see the health level of this forest at 80, 90, 100%, there's no way you're going to be developing on this because of that ecological system. So this leads to the issue of climate change. Now, this is coming to the question that somebody had there on how the difference between sustainable development and climate justice, environmental activism. Okay, we'll come back now. So I was lucky enough to be able to go to Melbourne, Australia, and be trained by Al Gore. The ex-vice president of the US, the famous Mr. Al Gore, whose campaign was truly based on, and is historically done, based on the environment, based on climate change. And that's what he thought, truly based on, and it's historically done, based on the environment, based on climate change. And that's what he thought. He'd win on and explain to people the reality behind it. So being trained by him, I have access to PowerPoint presentations and discussions, which I do at events and programs for companies and for individuals and for associations. So I would have loved to do this entire thing. I have a presentation that can take 3.5 hours on climate change, or I can do a very short one, but I'm not going to do the entire thing. And unfortunately, I'm not able to broadcast this presentation due to rights that the organization has. But we'll talk through it. So one of the first pictures on this presentation is a picture called the blue marble. It's a photo of Earth that NASA took in 1972, when they were apparently traveling to the moon. Some don't believe that they did, right? And this was Apollo 17's mission. It's called the Blue Marble. And it was actually the first picture of Earth, fully illuminated that anyone has ever seen. And it was taken on that Apollo mission. And it just, when you look at it, you look at this picture, it shows the connectedness that we are and the impact that we can have as a species on Earth, even though we're not the largest number of species. So there's three questions that we always ask when it comes to climate change. Must we change? Can we change? And will we change? Right? And that's the general three questions. And hopefully by the end of this, you'd understand that we have to change and we must change because there is definitely impact. Now, if you look at the globe as a whole, when I speak about the changes that happen on a climatic perspective, in every 24 hours, we are dumping 110 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into the atmosphere. 110 million tons every 24 hours. This is mankind globally, right? And that is causing huge effects to our ecosystem, that's affecting to our atmosphere, our ozone layer. And the impact of that is that the Earth is generally is warming up. That's the term global warming came in. Although there's a change now of terminology, we don't say global warming. We move more to the word climate change. The climate is changing at a speed. And the question that many of the deniers say, well, you know what, it is changing. Yeah, it's changed before. There was an ice age, there was a warmer period, you had dinosaurs, you had various climatic changes that had occurred. Why are you making a big issue about it now? The issue is the accelerated rate. It's the famous video have you seen of Al Gore? I think Simpsons has done a gimmick of it as well, of him climbing the ladder and getting to this chart that he was doing on the screen on the movie. And this the movie was I forgot the movie name. Anyway, The Inconvenient Truth. Sorry. So it was a chart that he was doing showing, the terms of temperatures, global temperatures rising, and he would use the ladder to show that in 2025 or 2030, the rate at how high the temperatures are going to be. And so it was a little gimmick that he would do, and it was interesting to see that kind of impact is possible and is happening on the Earth at an accelerated rate. The rate and the speed that it's happening is the problem. I mean, you have from air transport, oil production, fertilization, agriculture in terms of cows and cattle, industrial development, coal mining, landfills, so much of gases that human beings are creating, which should not be in existence. Now, we look at global phenomena, and the latest, The Inconvenient Truth sequel movie is really well done. Is the Indian Minister of the Environment and Energy sitting at a meeting with Al Gore and all of the environmentalists, and he says to the US government that, look, you guys have done production for hundreds of years, and you all had your chance. Now, this is how countries think. You had your chance to go and pollute the environment. Now you're coming to us as a third world and saying, no, we shouldn't be doing this, and we should be investing, as India should be investing into better renewable energy, when you guys had already had a chance. It's our turn now for 100 years to do what you've done. I mean, he was just being very facetious, but he was in a sense being real, right? He was saying, well, you had a chance, and why is it not given to us as a chance? And this is how countries think. So now you have everyone sitting on the table saying, how are we going to reduce our fossil fuel intake? How do we change to renewable resources? How do we start, reducing the carbon in the atmosphere? Do we charge a carbon tax? Who pays for it? Is it coming down to business? Business is going to charge that tax onto consumers. Consumers are going to feel the pinch and inflation and prices going up. It's not just an environmental issue, is what I want to bring it down to. Is that every decision that we make on the environment has an economical consequence and an impact, as well as a human consequence and impact. And that's the kind of reality I hope I can leave you with for today. So I did a very short aspect on that. I didn't want to go too much into the whole climate change. As I say, I can speak for hours on this. But I wanted to bring your notice to one more slide, if I can find it. Okay, so we can just move on to that. What I wanted to talk about was us as Muslims and our responsibility, right? So if you now understand how we are all part of nature, it's our part of our innateness, in how we are built. I mean, Allah speaks about how He has created us as clay. We're made from the soil of this earth and parts of it, and we are made similar to the soil of this earth. And how we are, if we are, then we are part of it. How we're made of water and all those resources. When the verse that I wanted to speak about was in Surah Kahf as well, chapter 18, verse 7. Inna ja'alna ma 'ala al-ardi zinatan laha linabluwahum ayyuhum ahsanu amala. Indeed, we have made that which is on the earth adornment for it. Allah has made beautiful gardens, beautiful food and produce that comes from it. But which of them is as we may test them to which of them is best indeed. That this natural resources, Allah has provided us with, Allah is testing us with this, because this is what He's provided, and saying, how are you going to use it? How are you going to be sustainable? Are you considering generations? Are you considering your neighbor? There is a terminology we use as environmentalists, and it's also a global thing called NIMBY, NIMBY, all right? Not in my backyard, NIMBY, NIMBY. And that is exactly against the Sunnah and practice of Islam. As a Muslim, as a human being, as an ethical human being, even if you don't have a religion, but there's someone living on earth with species all around you, how can you say not in my backyard? When there is a dumped waste next door to your house, when there is someone, and this again comes to humanitarian aspect, there's someone starving next to you, your neighbor is hungry, or someone down the village, down the road, or that informal settlement somewhere there does not have shelter, doesn't have home. That animal that is knocked on the street that's now panting, so maybe someone knocked the dog and now it needs help and needs assistance. How can you say not in my backyard? Because it's not in my backyard, I don't have any worry, I'm not concerned about it. As a Muslim, as someone who believes in Allah, as someone who believes in the final Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, it is your duty, it is your test that Allah has put in for you to be considering your footprint onto the earth, your environmental footprint. How you wake up in the morning, and it's a great study to do on how you can reduce your impact every day. You wake up in the morning, and we are all guilty of this, no doubt, without doubt. Even myself, greatly, even though I call myself an environmentalist, because it's difficult, right? To change habits is difficult, especially if you're living with people and your families and extended families. It becomes difficult to make that habit change. But you wake up in the morning, you realize that you put your kettle on. That is electricity, right? That is clean water that you got to your home. To get water to get to your home had so much of electricity and power and pumps to get to your home. So much of chemicals that had to be put in to get to your home to be clean, for you to be able to drink it as potable water. Already there's an impact from the second you wake up in the morning. Already there's an impact. You jump in your vehicle, you drive home. The food that you eat, you drive to work, that is fossil fuels burning, causing air pollution. Their natural resources being depleted, like this fossil fuels, which serve a purpose underground. They're not supposed to be overused in areas. We're leaving major cracks in the earth. When they talk about fracking, major cracks and holes in the earth, again very linked to eschatology, understanding the end of times, that the earth will be weak in its structure. Very interesting. So your environmental footprint, getting to work, the paper that you use, the trees that were used, oh, I made a mistake on a copy, 10 pages gone, 20 pages gone, throw down the bin, coming back from work. Again, the food that you eat at home, the amount of meat we consume has caused impact at every single scale and level. If you think about it too much, you might just get depressed. But the reality is that we have this impact. And if, number one, we speak about mindful living and a mindful meditation and understanding your consciousness of God and consciousness of being, then you have to be conscious about your impact on the earth and how heavy and how big your footprint is against on earth. There was a few more Quranic verses, and I think one or two the hadiths that I want to read to you. This was interesting in Surah Kaf, verse 38. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما من دابة في الأرض ولا طائر يطير بجناحي إلا أمم أمثالكم ما فرضنا في الكتاب من شيء ثم إلى ربهم يحشرون. There is not an animal on earth nor a creature flying on two wings, but they are nations like you. There's Allah speaking about the ecosystem, right? In verse 95, 96, and 97, and even 99 also have links, which I really am amazed how Allah explained this 1400 years ago to the Prophet in Surah Al-An'am. Indeed, Allah is the cleaver of grain and date seed. He brings the living out of the dead and brings the dead out of the living. That is Allah. So how are you deluded? He is the cleaver of daybreak and has made the night for rest and the sun and moon for calculation. That is the determination of the exalted in might, the knowing. One of the points of Surah Ar-Rahman and Surah Waqi'ah, Allah speaks about the measurements and scale. And I was thinking about this in the halaqah to say how gravity is a ni'mah and blessing for us. For us to be able to stand straight is because of gravity. Is because of gravity. Imagine as human beings like animals on our fours, and we could not stand straight. SubhanAllah. To further on in Surah Al-An'am, and it is He who placed for you the stars that you may be guided by them through the darkness of the land and sea. We have detailed the signs for the people who know. And it is He, Allah, who sends down rain from the sky, and we produce thereby the growth of all things. We produce from it greenery, from which we produce grains arranged in layers, and from the palm trees. Allah speaks, imagine Allah speaking about the palm trees in the Quran, direct words of Allah, from the palm trees of its emerging fruit and clusters hanging low, and we produce gardens of grapevines and olives and pomegranates, similarly yet varied. Similar yet varied. Allah speaks about species, that these pomegranate, you may get a species. I was talking about avocados the other day. There's various species of avocados. So you get Haas avocados that your Woolworths would sell, and your normal street vendors are selling a different type of avocado, which is much more bigger and thicker and harder skin, takes longer to kind of get soft. The Haas ones come from various countries. I know I was watching a documentary in Mexico that Mexico exports avocados through cartels in the US. Very interesting. So Allah says, we produce gardens of grapevines, olives, and pomegranates, similar yet varied. Look at each of its fruit when it yields and it's ripening. Indeed, they are signs for a people who believe. And so when scientists go in through the depths of how seeds and the value of pollination and spreading of seed, it just changes the game as scientists, subhanAllah. And finally, I wanted to mention this part to link about eschatology, which is the end of times. This is a very interesting point by Ibn Majah, attributed to Abu Umama, who the Prophet spoke about. It's a very common hadith about the 3 hard years before the Dajjal appears, and that there'll be great famine, that the sky would hold 1/3 of its rain, and then the earth would hold 1/3 of its produce. And similarly, the next year it would be 2/3, and the last year it would be 3/3, and then the whole earth would hold all of its produce and no plant will grow. So that was just a real reality check on the topic. All right, so I think I kind of gave a good synopsis of environmental issues and the link between economy and the link between the human being. So I just want to answer some questions here. How much a differential between sustainable development and climate justice approach to environmental outcome? Yeah, I mean, it's a critical one, but I think at the heart of the climate justice approach is truly about economies. You cannot look at environmental issues without understanding the business side of it, the economy side of it. It all is related. Forget about the GMOs and forget about all of that type of agriculture, purely based on the way that we survive on the earth right now, and probably for the next many generations until capitalism ends. We have to consider the reality that there is the economy as part of sustainable development, and it's part of the climate system. Look, at the end of the day, Al Gore and all these these I would call them environmental economists, look at it purely through a financial point of view, purely through that this is benefiting. They have their own companies. Al Gore and many of those environmental economists have renewable companies that provide renewable resources like wind energy and hydroelectrical energy and solar energy. They've got major companies that are producing, voltaic glass panels for Spain and for around the world. The ones that are in South Africa are all produced by these big conglomerates. So they're all jumping on the bandwagon. So there is definitely an economical aspect, like there's a social aspect, like there's environmental aspect. So I would always turn to, I don't want to use the word sustainable development, but in a sense, the understanding of sustainable development to understand how the solutions to environmental issues. It's important to note the earth, the land will bear witness either for us, either for or against us on the day of judgment. No doubt. No doubt. No doubt. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a direct link that we have as responsible human beings, as all us created, that you will question us again on your footprint, on working on the earth with heavy footprints. And heavy footprint is not only a physical, let's say, it's also impact on our neighbors and our surroundings. SubhanAllah. Right. Moving on now to a bit. So just before I move on, I'll leave the environmental, which is again all correlated, right? I want to talk about the environment and COVID-19. So if you're at home and you're concerned, hopefully you are safe and your families are safe. Allah protect you and Allah protect your families, protect our country, protect our people, protect all our elderly, our ulama. Hearing now that one of our alims has passed away in South Africa with this kind of illness. Allah protect all of us from this kind of illness. And as we know and as we believe that with hardship comes ease, Allah bring this ease for us as a world, as a global nation, inshallah. Ameen. Summa ameen. But I want you to relate the impact. This word is constantly used, I know. With regards to COVID-19 and the environment. So I'm sure you've seen some articles that have been posting around. Don't believe the dolphins in Italy article. It's just fake news. There's no dolphins in Italy, in the streams of Milan and so on. But no doubt that the earth seems to be taking a breather. I mean, I'm sitting here with you in my lounge, and I look outside on the road, on Sparks Road, where I live, which is a busy road here in Durban. And at this time at night, which is about 9:20 on a working night, it would have been busy. It would have been still busy. People just closing their shops, cars driving around, people moving from place to place. But alhamdulillah, right now, it is super pin drop silent. Not even a street cleaner, not even a street person, not even a homeless person, because they've all moved out. It has really changed. So the earth, and that's just on my scale here, but on a global scale, we're seeing air quality issues and pollution reducing in India, in Delhi, in China, in Italy, in Rome, many other parts of the world where they generally are higher. We're seeing the reduction, subhanAllah, which is a good thing. But we know that when they start up the engines again, you know what happens when you start a car that's off for a while, or an old car, you hear that sound for a while and smoke just comes out. When they start up the engines and the industry starts again, sorry, I touched my face there, we're going to find a really big problem again. But at the moment, it seems like Earth is taking a breather. Unfortunately, in South Africa, our Ministry of Environmental Affairs has agreed, and I just had a conversation now on the Muslim Youth Council Instagram page, live discussion on the same issue, where our South African government has agreed to increase the limit from a 500 to 1,000 micrograms of sulfur, just sulfur only, to be emitted into the atmosphere. And they did this because of multiple reasons, and the demand on coal. And if you are able to burn less coal, you can actually, it would increase the sulfur, and there's a whole process of scrubbers and so on. So they've done this to help Eskom, not major companies, but more Eskom during this time, because it's saying, oh look, the levels of pollution are less, so this is a great opportunity for Eskom to now recoup. But I don't agree. It's a really dangerous decision that has been made. The Ground Truth, an organization, NGO that does environmental research, has done research, and they look at 950 lives at stake because of this. And imagine if they're going to be affecting, now you have more pollution in the air, linking to COVID-19, is those who have respiratory diseases are going to be affected. And so I'll protect them. How much is important of the earth's land? Okay. There are some interesting ideas being developed in decolonial thinking, the argument being that colonial ways of thinking have disconnected us from environment. Now, that's exactly my point. So this, after understanding the environment, we've got to understand humanitarian issues, because it's all linked in the economy. But going back in time, when we look at what is being proposed as solutions to the climate issue, proposed issues to pollution issues and to environmental issues in general, it truly is to go back in time. And when you speak about the colonial thinking and decolonial thinking, it's exactly that. It's going back in time where man was living with nature and not against nature. So when you say recycle, hello, there was recycling done years ago. In the days of our great grandfathers, was that when their waste would be thrown into a pile, used as, when they chopped down those fruit and vegetables, it was used as manure already. That was part of their lives when they were doing sustainable farming. They were doing it. Now we've got these little gadgets at your home to make your own home compost. Composting was done then, using the worms of the earth to create better composting material for their farms. Was a life living like that. When everyone says go organic, organic was then. It was the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. It was the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to be organic. Allah speaks about it in the Quran. He says, halal wa tayyib. Halalun tayyiba. Halalan tayyiba. Not just halal. Not just halal. We've just always reduced it. Allah knows why. Halalan tayyiba. Allah speaks about it as halal and pure, wholesome, organic. Organic is part of our nature as Muslims. So just like that, going back in time, if you ask, that's the solution. It's going to be difficult. We live in concrete buildings. We live in huge, dense populations. How do we bring that to the normal man on the street? It's a mission impossible, I agree. But there's ways and means to do it strategically. Governments are there for a reason. We pay taxes, and that's why it's important as activists to try and use our opportunities to create solutions together, innovate, and use it to do so. So obviously, I'd love to have more time to talk about that, but inshallah we can move on. How environmentally friendly is SA's most recent budget? Yeah, I mean, interestingly, we look at carbon tax, right? That's been implemented, and we have a new climate change bill that's in process at the moment. So the carbon tax is good. It's 120 Rand a ton. And if you do some calculations, some of the big companies are going to be paying a big amount of tax. It's going to go to SARS, our revenue services. God knows where it goes after that. Does it go for pure, for communities that have been affected by pollution? Does it go towards, better, renewable resources, or research towards renewable resources, purchasing of it as government states reducing our reliance on coal? I have no idea if that's going to be happening. So we can only wish. But they, it's implemented already, the carbon tax. And I think companies, I've actually got a couple of calls from some auditors who want to start working out their responsibility into the carbon tax. The climate change bill that's out, I could be working on it soon as well with regards to some advocacy. But again, I haven't read the details of it. I've just skimmed parts of it. It's all good on paper. Everything's good on paper. But when it comes to implementation, it struggles. I've been in government 10 years, I can tell you that the law that we've been trying to implement takes days, months, hours, years to get someone guilty of an environmental crime. I mean, I worked with major environmental developments, also developments that had environmental impact. And it took me 3 years to go to court, how much of testaments and affidavits, signing, go back to court, 3 years to get someone this was an illegal mining case, for example, sand mining. And then unfortunately the man dies before the case is even finalized. So yeah, it comes to that, it may be a problem. So now that you've got a good synopsis of the environment and our link as Muslims and our responsibility as Muslims, it moves on to our responsibility as Muslims to others. When I spoke about NIMBY, when we speak about environment, we have a duty towards each other. We have a duty to ourselves first. So, when they speak about self-love, you have to love yourself. So first you got to do self-love. First, you have to love yourself and protect yourself from harm. That's harm towards your physical nature, harm to your soul, harm to your mind, to your body. But more importantly, moving is your family, as your community, your family and community, and then your responsibility towards mankind. It's all of those phases that you got to understand. So there's different things we'll implement at a different scale. All right. So although again everything's interlinked, it's really strange how I see the world. I truly see the world as everything is interlinked, and it's the only way that you should be seeing the world. That everything happens for a reason. Everything is connected somehow, somewhere. It's like a literal, Indian family that's connected. No, I got a connection. We have this connection. We have this connection to everything. Don't look at a certain thing, as this computer that's in front of me, or this mic, or this mouse, as something that is not alive in a sense. It has connections. It's made of plastic. It had processes. It came from somewhere. Some natural resources were used here. There was an impact in using this. What happens to it when I throw it away? Comes in. When I throw it away, it has an impact later on its life. And we call that the cycle of life for anything. The cradle to grave kind of understanding. So from a humanitarian point of view, alhamdulillah, as I grew up in Durban, my late father, Allah grant him the highest stage of Jannah, was a good man who did a lot of community work. And so I grew up with the MSA. That time was the Muslim movement and many of those kind of Ikhwani movements. Interesting how life was then, and much more simple, I guess, as a child. But this kind of community work was part of who I am and my family life. My dad was always out in meetings, discussing how work that he could do for the community in various spaces. And alhamdulillah, he lived his life truly like that. And when he passed away, he had hardly any money with him. And it was one thing when I picked up his phone about 2-3 weeks later, and when I was setting out his matters, and I would see someone's name typed in as donor, and someone further down would be recipient. And he was the means of connecting someone who had money to someone who needed money, subhanAllah. And if we can live our lives like that, even if we don't have a cent to our name, but if we are the means of benefit for someone who's in need and benefit for someone who wishes to give, then our role in society has been played, subhanAllah. And I ask Allah ask Allah to truly make us one of those who help people throughout our lives, inshallah. So growing up as that is what I was always with, and alhamdulillah, I had opportunity to do a lot of work with other organizations, and the Ansar Foundation at point after he passed away, he was one of the founders of it. It was actually founded in the lounge of my home, and that's how greatness starts. There was a saying by Accidental Muslims posted the other day about Sheikh Suhaib Webb, who said that every great Islamic movement was started through a halaqah, through Quran. And just like that, my dad and my uncle and a few of his friends started that organization based on halaqah, on understanding the Quran and their purpose. And they saw the need for Islamic education. This is 25, 30 years ago in South Africa, and Durban specifically. So just like that, everything has value. So for us as human beings, we understand our footprint in terms of environment has to be reduced as much as we can. Mindfulness throughout the day, throughout our life. Where am I throwing this? What am I doing? But in terms of our responsibility to humanity, our footprint must be big, especially as Muslims. Especially as Muslims, our footprint has to be big, it has to be bold. And Allah and the Prophet speaks about what you give with your right hand, your left hand should not know. At the same time, those who are of other faith, as a tool of da'wah, they should know. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine from Penny Appeal, the charity I'm with, and he asked me, you know, you call yourself a humanitarian. And he said, don't you think that, this is a good, brotherly banter that we would have, and always testing each other, always questioning each other, our intentions. So he says, don't you think calling a humanitarian is a bit boastful? You say on your Twitter feed or whatever, you're a humanitarian. Isn't that like being boastful about the work that you do? And I said, truly it is. It is boastful. And there's a reason behind the boastfulness, right? Allah must give us pride in our work, but not pride in our hearts, right? So I said, it is, but there's a value behind it. It is a strategy behind it. And I said, that's why I have people like you who would always be questioning me and bring me down to earth. So when our responsibility to humanity, we look at what is firstly the need. I know my time is nearly ending. It's already 29 minutes past, so I'm going to go a little over one hour. But I wanted to just end off in this. So we look at what is the need in the community. Now, being out there in South Africa, I've traveled now to a couple of other countries in Africa doing aid. I see that it all comes down to a concept called toxic charity. It's a beautiful book that one of our still MSA alumni, Mariam Jiveri, shared with me, which really it blew my mind how we need to be as humanitarians. It was a guy who wrote, I can't remember his name. If you want to go search for that book, it's called Toxic Charity. He's got two sequel to the first book, Toxic Charity. And he speaks about, he says, as true as humanitarian, he has 35 years in the humanitarian industry, all his life, for international NGOs. He said, let's be honest between each other as humanitarians. You have gone to a village. You saw the need was water. You saw the need was education. You saw the need. These you're saying you're giving civilization to these people, subhanAllah. But when you go visit these people, I've spent time in Gambia, and I spent time in Sudan, I spent time here in the townships, and I'm not talking about more the villages. You ask these people, they're happy. Their civilization is good. Yes, they have issues of medical issues and issues of access to clean water. But in terms of civilization, and I think someone spoke about the deep colonial thinking, that is their civilization. You don't bring civility to them. What you're bringing is rights to them. And it's their right. If you're part of a society, it's the right that we have to provide as neighbors, as community, as Muslims, as people. It's the right that they have over us that we have to fulfill, for us to provide them with the resources for a better life. And they're not poor in the sense as we understand of rands and cents and dollars. They are not poor in that way. What they are is that they have lesser resources than us. You may believe that your phone is the best thing that you have and is the most valuable thing that you have. To them, water, clean water, close to their home is the most valuable thing that they have. So being with these communities, and even in environmental aspect, we understand local knowledge, how important it is, understanding the need from their aspect, not understanding the need from your aspect as a person coming from a major city, going to the community and saying, I'm coming and I'll give you water and give you this and I'll give you that, but understanding it from their side. So spending time with them is very important. Spending time with those who are in need will make you understand their needs better than you think you do. And so it links to, again, the fact that, sorry, I lost my train of thought. There was so much I want to talk about there. Okay, yes, I wanted to link it to current crisis. So in the current crisis that we're facing, yes, COVID-19 has an impact on communities, especially those who have TB and those have, AIDS and those already immune depleting illnesses, especially in our South African context and globally as well. But at the same time, we're going to have a problem of food security. Now, alhamdulillah, I'm so happy and proud. Many organizations in South Africa and so on are doing amazing work. So, they're going out and they, food hampers and food packs and hygiene kits, and it's this whole buzz thing, and alhamdulillah, That is amazing work. But as per this book that I read, they speak about the fact that we have to look at charity as sustainable charity. Again, the word sustainability, right? Charity has to be sustainable. How long are you going to be begging to a donor? How many years are you going to be begging to donor to donate? He'll donate continuously, no doubt. But it comes to crisis like this, the whole world is being affected. Now the donor tells you, sorry, brother, I'm going to cut down on my donation. And this is why it has to be sustainable. Secondly, the actual type of charity that is being done, or the work that's being done, the humanitarian work, has to be sustainable as well. It can't be food parcels every time and feeding all the time. As there's a need, like in this case, for the next few weeks, there's going to be a need for feeding people and helping people, especially medical-wise, and keeping them safe in their communities. But we have to look at the future. If you're not going to have access to clean water, how do they wash their hands? If they don't have access to shelter, how do they protect themselves and not be spreading it everywhere? The future, understanding this crisis as what happens after the 21 days is really, I feel, my personal opinion, more important than right now, because everyone can make a hamper and send it out and feed people right now. Who's caring for them in 3 to 6 weeks time, 6 months time, 1 year? So if I leave you with that, and understanding that we have a responsibility for a footprint that is small as environment and large as a nation, then it's important that we have and fulfill the rights of others against us. When I look at this crisis in Myanmar, in parts of Bangladesh, Pakistan, and the poorest of poor are going to really face, because not only is it a health crisis, which is a social issue, it's not only an environmental issue, it is also purely an economical issue, which is going to affect economies, and it's going to affect people from across the globe. SubhanAllah. So again, I ask Allah to guide us to better ourselves, better our communities, and inshallah that He creates this as a safer space. I'm going to look at any questions that's come on. I'm just looking through any questions online. So thank you for everyone for tuning in. Let us look on Facebook. Any further questions down here? I think we're all done. So yeah, again, again, I wish I could speak about much more. I was going to talk about also a bit of my business and starting a business, maybe on another date, talking about starting a business and how the challenges of the process of business, and now again in this kind of crisis, how it's affecting each business as a young entrepreneur. But I think we've reached there. Jazakallah, brother, for your mashallah. Thank you again for tuning in. From me, brother Nazeer Jamal, stay well, stay safe, and Allah protect you, and find ways then dispose of it in the best manner. But do not dispose of your good deeds, increase your good deeds. From me, brother Nazeer, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. End stream.